heroes of all things fantasy.
Welcome in, MD Nation. Welcome to the show. Welcome back to the MD's Fantasy Football Show. As always, I'm your host, Dan Mader. And how does everybody feel now that we finally have results in from week one? We spent an entire summer hypothetically going over if this happens, if that were to happen, projecting this, seeing that. We actually have a week of results to talk about in today's show and the waiver wire report. Now, I want to make something clear before we dive into all of our content today. And it's going to be a jam-packed show. But this is not the normal schedule that you're going to have. We weren't able to come out yesterday like we normally would on Sunday night and just recap in detail the Sunday afternoon games. Normally speaking, that's what would happen. We would come on Sunday night while the Sunday night game is still going on, stream it live, it would be available for you guys on your favorite pod streaming apps after the fact. iHeart, Stitcher, Google Play, iTunes, Spreaker, wherever you like to go. And we'd have that full recap for you and then come back on Monday night, not go live, but record the Sunday night recap, the Monday night recap, and the waiver wire report for that to go live for you guys on Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. That's what this show is. We're recording this Monday night to go live on Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. So we're not going to be able to do the Monday night recap because we got a ton to get to. I have all these games I at least want to mention and get to the waiver wire report. And it's only an hour show. Tuesday is only an hour show. Normally we do an hour and a half, only an hour on Tuesday. Just like on Saturdays is only an hour. So we got a lot of information I got to jam pack in here for you guys for an hour-long show. But I wanted to make sure you made clear, future reference, we will be 5 times a week. We'll normally be live on Sunday nights. Just so MD Nation is aware. But like I said, today we're going over the full recap with the exception of the Monday night game and the waiver wire report for you guys at the end of the show. I just want to go through and mention some key tidbits about week one and what a jam-packed week it was. I mean, really, what a jam-packed week it was. Just like any week, there's going to be guys who play to expectation. There's going to be guys who disappoint. There's going to be unexpected injuries. All of that came to fruition, of course, in this week, like it's going to every single week. But we got to dive in, and how do we move forward? That's the question. What not to overreact to, what maybe to pay attention to, and maybe change your viewpoint on some guys moving forward. That's all part of it. So let's dive into that Sunday night game. Let's kick things off with that. The Rams take care of business, 34-14. They are the superior team. Nothing surprising about that game there. Matthew Stafford looked great in his first outing at home. 20 of 26, 321 yards, 3 passing touchdowns. Looked very at home in that Sean McVay offense. No issues with bootlegs. They kept talking about that during the announcements. Chris Collinsworth in particular. I wasn't sure how he was going to be. Like Matthew Stafford was never a statue. Like, he was always a little bit of an athlete. Now, he's not a big-time scrambler by any stretch of the means, but if you've ever watched any of Matthew Stafford, you could tell he could definitely run bootlegs and run this offense to perfection. And he almost did. I mean, he was almost perfect. Like I said, 20 of 26, 321 yards, 3 passing touchdowns. Pretty much got everybody involved. Hit Cooper Kupp on a big one, 56 yards. He had 10 targets, 7 receptions, 108 yards, and a touchdown. Was absolutely phenomenal in his debut with Matthew Stafford, showing some rapport there. Robert Woods didn't have the big day, but still got into the end zone. 3 catches, 27 yards, a touchdown, saved your fantasy day. Only 4 targets. I don't think it's going to be much different than what we saw with Jared Goff. There's going to be some Cooper Kupp games, some Robert Woods games. There might be some game scripts where they can both do really, really well. But the point is, it was those 2 guys at wide receiver. Van Jefferson, yeah, he had the big 67-yard touchdown, but 3 targets. Deshaun Jackson only had 2 targets. Tyler Higbee, 6 targets, 5 catches, 68 yards. Now, he's probably not going to crack that top 5 of tight ends like I wanted him to and ranked him to, but very encouraged by the snap count, very encouraged by the targets that he got there, that he was right amongst Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods as the top 3 targeted players of this entire team. Big thing to take away, Darrell Henderson, 16 carries, 70 yards, had 1 reception for 17 yards, but Now, and part of this could be because Sony Michel is still new to the team here, but Darrell Henderson acted like the dominant ball carrier, not just from touches, 17-1, but when they played. Sony Michel played 3 snaps later on in the game. Darrell Henderson played 49. So pretty much 99% of the snaps went to Darrell Henderson. That's got to give you some confidence. And he looked good. Remember, this Bears team, when they have Akeem Hicks, they're a pretty decent defensive front. He looked good in this matchup. So you got to feel confident about that if you drafted Darrell Henderson for him to continue to be a RB2. Ultimately, the Rams, not a lot changes other than the guys played the way you'd hope they would. Some better days might be ahead for Robert Woods. But the guys you wanted to be involved were the main guys involved. And the big question about Darrell Henderson, he looked like a workhorse. He looked pretty good to me. Looked pretty efficient against what should be at least a decent Bears front by the end of the year. On the flip side, Andy Dalton predictably looked horrible. 27-38, 206 yards, interception. Did not play well at all. They had a Justin Fields package where he ran it in for a touchdown. It may be sooner rather than later we see Justin Fields. And we're going to talk about him in the waiver wire later. Another guy of note, David Montgomery, 16 carries, 108 yards, and a touchdown in a tough matchup. But he looked good running the ball. And this is a guy, he was not going to go down on first contact. That much was for sure. He looked very good running the football, breaking tackles, dragging guys with him, falling forward, 6.8 yards a carry, only 1 target for 1 catch and 10 yards. That's what I was worried about. Damian Williams, 5 targets, 4 catches, 28 yards. So while David Montgomery still had a very good fantasy day because he had a great game on the ground, and that can be encouraging because the Rams dominated this game. So the fact that they didn't abandon the running game and he still wound up at 17 touches in a game script like this has to give you some confidence moving forward. And you got to think this offense will get a little bit better once Justin Fields takes over. But Damian Williams did exactly what I was fearful of for David Montgomery to potentially have a low floor or at least have his ceiling capped. He wasn't involved in the passing game. That was Damian Williams the whole way. He is the pass catcher. He did take on the Tariq Cohen role. That's something I was concerned about. So for me, David Montgomery has to still be an RB2, and you have to limit your ceiling expectations on him, but you love the way he ran. You love the way he ran. By the way, Montgomery, 41 snaps. Damian Williams, 30 snaps. That is not an anomaly. That is something I think will continue. Williams is going to be there on passing downs just enough to annoy all of us when it comes to David Montgomery's upside. Outside of that, Allen Robinson, better days ahead, of course. The 11 targets is what you hold your hat on. 6 catches, 35 yards. He was matched against Jalen Ramsey for most of this game. The only other note for the Bears, maybe keep an eye on Cole Kmet. He doesn't make my waiver wire report just because there's still nothing exciting about this team outside of Allen Robinson and David Montgomery until Justin Fields takes over. But Cole Kmet did vastly outsnap Jimmy Graham. It wasn't even close. 51 snaps to 14. He dominated the targets. He dominated the pass routes. So Cole Kmet might be somebody who down the road you keep an eye on as a sleeper tight end that you may be picking up to kind of stream. He did enter that conversation for me based on this performance. 7 targets, 5 catches, 42 yards. Again, not very exciting until Justin Fields takes over, but like to see that Jimmy Graham no longer going to just steal all the red zone looks from a Cole Kmet. Cole Kmet is very much the tight end to have on this organization. So he might be a streamer at some point this year. Just kind of keep an eye out for that. Let's move on. Let's talk about this Packers-Saints game, which was, I thought the Saints might come out and play really, really hard given all the circumstances, given their home game is going to be in Jacksonville. And, everybody was counting on them to lose. The back's up against the wall. Sean Payton's a great coach. They thrive in that situation. I thought they'd come out and play hard. I didn't think they'd come out and dominate from start to finish and win this game 38-3. Now, part of it is the Saints looked very good. Jameis Winston looked very good. The other aspect of this, though, is that the Packers looked incredibly rusty. I mean, incredibly rusty, disgustingly rusty. Not something I was anticipating for this team to come out and look like. Aaron Rodgers played training camp. They got the contract done. It wasn't like they missed training camp altogether. They didn't play any preseason games, so they didn't last year either. Devontae Adams had been there for all training camp. These guys weren't banged up. So people are talking about, well, they didn't play any in preseason games, so maybe they're just a little bit rusty, maybe they're a little bit off. I mean, look, they're going to get it together. And yes, they were just a little bit off, and I don't expect the Packers to look like this all season long. But I don't give them an excuse because they were one of the few teams that weren't dealing with injuries, weren't dealing with holdouts as far as their offensive core goes. I don't care they didn't play any preseason. They didn't play any preseason games last year, and they were absolutely sharp. I don't know what that was. At one point, Aaron Rodgers was YOLOing it. His second interception was a complete frustration throw where he just threw it up. He just threw it up for grabs. He was done. He was done with the game. Plain and simple. So you probably lost if you had a Packer on your team, but obviously better days are ahead for Rodgers. Better days are ahead for Devontae Adams. Better days are definitely ahead for Aaron Jones, which just was a little bit of a tough matchup coming in for running backs for Aaron Jones to begin with. So I'm not overly concerned with that. On the same side of the ball, Jameis Winston played great. 5 touchdowns off of 20 attempts, only 148 passing yards. Just all he did was throw touchdowns. That's it. That's all he did. Hit Juwan Johnson twice. Hit Deontay Harris on a big one for a 55-yarder. Hit Chris Hogan. Chris Hogan had 1 catch for 10 yards in the end zone. And then, of course, the other receiving touchdown with the Alvin Kamara, who we'll talk about in a second. Marquez Callaway only had 2 targets for 1 catch and 14 yards. Before you jump ship on Marquez Callaway being a sleeper guy that you were going to be able to throw in there who has some upside ability, remember, he was a matchup against Jay Alexander. Now, I wasn't too worried about that because I thought they would feature Callaway by moving him in the slot, giving him the Michael Thomas role, essentially, where he didn't always just line up on the perimeter. Sean Payton didn't do that in this game. He actually left Marquez Callaway out there in the X spot, out on the perimeter, where Alexander could play him the majority of this game. That had more to do with it than anything, because when you look at the snap count, Marquez Callaway dominated all wide receivers as far as playing time. He had 52 snaps. The next closest was Deontay Harris at 27. So Callaway's the number 1 until Michael Thomas comes back. Callaway's playing. Better days are ahead for Marquez Callaway. Remember, Jameis Winston only threw the ball 20 times in this game. So even though he had the 5 touchdowns and the big fantasy performance, it was still only 20 pass attempts. Just keep that in mind before you jump ship on Marquez Callaway being a sleeper guy. The other thing, Juwan Johnson, backup tight end, he had 2 touchdowns, so he has the big fantasy day. But again, don't put the blinders on. Adam Troutman, another sleeper tight end of ours, he played 51 snaps. So he had a lot of playing time, 51 snaps, and led the team in targets. Now, it was only 6, but still led the team in targets. 3 catches, 18 yards. He just didn't happen to have the 2 touchdowns. So again, better days are ahead for Adam Troutman. Juwan Johnson is not a pickup. That is a pothole. It looks all good. It looks all shiny. It looks like it's okay. And then boom, you just wreck the whole bottom of your car. And I know that was not the greatest metaphor, but that's what came off the top of my head. It's late on a Monday night. What do you want? Adam Troutman is the guy moving forward. He's still worth a pickup if he's available on your waiver wire. He's still a streaming tight end in my mind. Most targeted, by far had the most snaps. So he's going to be involved moving forward. That I'm not worried about. Alvin Kamara was great. 20 carries, 83 yards. This was a nice match against Green Bay. Typically speaking, you have good matchups against Green Bay Packers here. Gets the reception touchdown. 4 targets, 3 receptions, 8 yards and a touch. I know that's not the passing numbers we're used to, but again, only 20 pass attempts. They didn't have to check the ball down all that much. I'm not concerned that all of a sudden Alvin Kamara is not going to be the PPR monster that we all expect him to be. He will. Don't worry about that aspect of it at all. All right, let's keep this thing moving. Let's go to the Miami Dolphins, New England Patriots. 17-16, more of a defensive game. Kind of expected it to be. We didn't expect a big over in this game at all. Tua Tagovailoa, despite the mediocre-looking stat line of 16-27, 202 yards, a touchdown, interception, I thought he looked pretty good. He was willing to throw the ball deep, and he was willing to hit Devontae Parker, who had 7 targets. He was willing to hit Jalen Waddle, who had 6 targets and a touchdown in this game. We'll see next week when you get Will Fuller back. It's clear that this offense is going to be built around Tua throwing the ball to the wide receivers. That's what this offense is going to be built upon. That's what we expected to be built upon. But there's a 17-16 game script, and you still only had 23 carries as a team. 9 carries, Myles Gaskin was a leading carrying guy, and he's efficient with that. 5.4 yards carry, 49 yards. He was. But still, in a game where it's 17-16, where you think ball control, no running back had double-digit carries. None. Now, Gaskin is still a high-end RB3 because he comes back. He has 5 targets, 5 receptions, 27 yards. We're talking about half-point PPR leagues, which is what we generally do our analysis off of. He's still a RB3, still a flex play, still a safe floor because he's going to get those receptions. I mean, the only other guy, Savon Ahmed, had 3 targets, 2 receptions, 24 yards. Malcolm Brown was not targeted at all. So that's the good news when it comes to Malcolm Brown in that scenario. Myles Gaskin is still by far the best running back on this team. And this is against a tough New England Patriot defense, who are always tough against the runners when Hightower's playing. I think you get encouraged by Devontae Parker actually being targeted, and you like what you saw at Jalen Waddle. However, we still have to reassess next week when Will Fuller comes back and how these targets are going to break down, because I still have the suspicion that Will Fuller might wind up being the number 1 target at the end of the day. On the Patriots side of the ball, Mac Jones had a really nice, I thought, debut. He has a tough defense coming in, didn't make too many mistakes, 39 pass attempts, 29 completions, 281 yards, a touchdown. Thought he played pretty solidly for a guy who doesn't have a ton of weapons going his way, as we're having some trouble with the mic here. Nelson Aguilar was actually the big receiver of the day, 5 catches, 72 yards. Hey, I had the touchdown, 7 targets, but Jakobi Meyers was the most targeted receiver with 9 targets in this ball game. Just didn't have the touchdown to kind of go ahead with it. But look, as far as these wide receivers go, Nelson Aguilar, I'm keeping him on the waiver wire. I'll keep my eye on him as this thing propels. I think Meyers, Aguilar, they will be the 2 top receivers. Myers probably still has a little bit safer of a floor. I do expect him to be the most targeted guy at the end of the day. But still, there's not a ton of talent, not a ton of upside, really nothing more than wide receiver 4s in my book. As we go through the season, we'll keep an eye to see if their value changes at all. The other aspect of it, James White did what I expected James White to do. 7 targets, 6 receptions, 49 yards. He is the pass-catching guy. Harris had 3 targets, 2 catches, 17 yards. So that's not nothing when you compare what these Patriots usually do. But when it comes to these passing downs, his ceiling is going to be capped as far as that goes. And he had a bad fumble that gave away this game. Does that carry on into next week with Bill Belichick? Knowing how Belichick is, does that carry on? There's already been some talk from some of the beat reporters in New England that we might actually see J.J. Taylor suddenly become available next week, where he was a healthy scratch this week, where he suddenly might get thrown into the rotation, and maybe you wind up seeing him, and maybe Stevenson's the one inactive because he had a bad fumble in this game too and didn't really play much after that either. It's hard for me to believe that they would just turn away from Damian Harris that quickly, that easily. But this is Bill Belichick we're talking about. And when guys fumble, he's liable to do anything when it comes to the running backs. And we already were kind of worried about J.J. Taylor getting work at some point unexpectedly for no reason too. So just something to kind of keep your eye on. Damian Harris will still be a high-end RB3, low-end RB2 for me, somewhere in that range heading into next week. But it is going to be interesting if J.J. Taylor winds up being active. I might be a little worried that Harris is still in the doghouse for at least one more week. We'll see exactly what happens there. Jonnu Smith, 5 catches, 42 yards, 5 targets. Hunter Henry, 3 catches, 31 yards, 3 targets. Better days are ahead. The one thing I will take a note of, though, with Mac Jones, the wide receivers were more targeted, and the wide receivers can be more targeted on the outside as he can actually throw it to the outside and throw it deep. So this may actually wind up taking away some value, but I do think better days are ahead for the tight ends. They're still very much involved in the game plan. Smith had 55 snaps, Hunter Henry's 54, so very even between the two of them as well. There's still guys that are going to be hovering around my top 12 territory when it comes to tight ends. Remember, this is a tough matchup for tight ends against the Miami Dolphins too. I do have to hit the drop alert, though. We have our first dump player of the year.
Prepare to be flushed.
Mike Gesicki. Drop him. Drop him. Not only was the guy outsnapped by his teammates, and I'm pulling it up here as we speak, it was outsnapped by Smith, but he was out-targeted, or had just as many targets. 0 receptions. Will Fuller's not even back yet, and Mike Gesicki was not involved at all. Even if Mike Gesicki goes on to have a few good games, you're never going to know when those games come. You're never going to know when to play him. Not at all. It's clear this team is built for Tua to the wide receivers. So Mike Gesicki, if you have him, go ahead and drop him because it's over for him. Let's keep this thing rolling. Let's talk about the Cleveland Browns. Kansas City Chiefs did not disappoint. Was going in as the game of the week for Sunday. It played like it was the game of the week. It was a great game. Kansas City Chiefs come back from behind to win this thing. Tyreek Hill Tyreek Hill, 3 yards away from a 200-yard day. 11 receptions, 197 yards, and a touchdown on 15 targets. Travis Kelce, 2 touchdowns, 6 receptions on 76 yards on 7 targets. Everybody else, 3 targets. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Mecole Hardman, 3 targets. That was the next most targeted players. This is looking a lot like last year. This is looking a lot like it's the Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce show, and then everybody else, which is going to lead me to do this once again.
Prepare to be flushed.
That's for Mecole Hardman, by the way. There's no reason to have a Mecole Hardman on your team anymore. None. His snap count was actually less than DeMarcus Robinson, something I talked about that had been a pattern in the past where DeMarcus Robinson would normally play ahead of him, even though maybe Mecole Hardman winds up with an extra target than he does. The point is this. This is the Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill show. Kind of like the Mike Gesicki thing. You're never going to know when to play these guys. So unless they get hot at some point in the season, no longer a reason to hold on to a Mecole Hardman, DeMarcus Robinson, or anybody. And Byron Pringle came up with the runt of the litter. He's only in the teens in snaps compared to the other 2 guys who actually played a significant amount as well. So move on from that. Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Look, I'm worried this could be a common stat line for Clyde Edwards-Helaire. 14 carries, 43 yards, not particularly efficient. This is a tough defense against the Browns. They'll have better, more efficient days as far as that goes. But 3 targets, 3 catches, 29 yards. There was not a big emphasis to get Clyde Edwards-Helaire more involved in the passing game. Patrick Mahomes, guess what? Still has a big arm, still doesn't check the ball down. Oh, here's another thing. You're worried about him getting, pigeonholed and not getting the goal line carries, possibly Darrell Williams or somebody else. The heck with that. They won't even line up in goal line formation inside the 5. They're in pure shotgun 24/7 all the time. Mahomes is the man. I just don't think Clyde Edwards-Helaire is in position to see more than 5 or 6 touchdowns this entire year. And he doesn't have what you wish he would have coming out of college, that safe floor of catching the football, because they're not going to be designed around getting into the running back. There's not. He'll have better days ahead. There's no doubt about that. They're going to have games where they're not going to necessarily have to come back from behind. They'll be up. He'll get a few more looks. He'll be a little bit more efficient against easier defenses. I'm not saying that. He's still a RB2, a low-end RB2, perhaps, instead of a mid-level RB2, though, because now you're seeing the ceiling is still capped on him. And it's week 1. But I don't see a big ceiling for Clyde Edwards-Helaire. For some people out there who thought maybe that he could rebound and become the RB1 they were hoping he would be a season ago, I don't see that happening here. On the Brown side of the ball, OBJ wound up being a late inactive kind of unexpectedly, but they did what the Browns do best. Nick Chubb, 15 carries, 83 yards. He had 2 touchdowns. Kareem Hunt still got in the end zone, 6 carries for 33 yards, and was the leading pass-catching back. 3 targets, 3 catches, 28 yards. Nick Chubb's 2 receptions for 18 and 2 targets. Nothing about their roles changed. Now, Kareem Hunt didn't get a lot of touches in this game. He wound up getting a touchdown, which saved his fantasy value. You played him as a flex as an RB2, which most people did. He's still going to finish there. But the snap count was 31-28. It's still almost even as far as their playing time on the actual field. So for me, nothing really changes for this team moving forward. Baker Mayfield had a really great day, 21 of 28, 321 yards. I shouldn't say a great day. Fantasy-wise, he was fine. NFL-wise, he was efficient with the 1 pick. Jarvis Landry, 5 targets. Schwartz, 5 targets. Njoku, 5 targets. Like I said, OBJ didn't play in this game. Jarvis Landry getting 5 targets in a game in which they wound up having to trail to Kansas City with no OBJ out there. Look, he's got a safe floor if OBJ's not out there, but he's still nothing more than a wide receiver 3 at best. Even when there's no OBJ. When there is an OBJ, I don't see how he's anything more than a wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5. There's just not enough volume to go around. This team is built around the running game, and you also have a 3-man rotation at tight end. So, I mean, Austin Hooper wasn't guys that I had ranked in the area to be drafted anyway, but in case you did...
Prepare to be flushed.
Do yourself a favor and drop Austin Hooper. There's not going to be a Cleveland tight end that you can stream this entire season because they have a 3-man rotation. And again, this team is just built through the running game. When OBJ comes back because of his big play capability, if he's healthy enough to do so, He's the only other wide receiver I'm interested in. As far as snap count goes, Donovan Peoples-Jones played the second most snaps behind Jarvis Landry. Apparently, Rashard Higgins is all the way down the depth chart because he played 4 snaps. Anthony Schwartz played well ahead of Rashard Higgins. So I'm not sure what happened there because they paid Rashard Higgins a little bit of money too. But apparently, he's nowhere to be found on this depth chart either. So it's not like he's a sleeper play at some point with OBJ being out too. I'm not worried about Anthony Schwartz as far as him being a waiver claim or anything like that. Again, there's just too much value in the running game, and we'll see exactly what happens when OBJ comes back. Moving on. Let's go to the Denver Broncos and New York Giants. This game went about as I expected it to. I expected the Broncos to control and dominate this game, and they did. Daniel Jones is still a crappy quarterback. There's no doubt about it. He's still terrible in the red zone, too, by the way. He's still a fumble master. He lost a fumble in this game. From a fantasy perspective, he still keeps himself a little bit interesting because he does run. 6 carries, 27 yards. He found himself in the end zone. So maybe at some point in some matchups, especially playing in the NFC East, he may be a streamer possibility. I don't know when you're ever going to feel good about playing Daniel Jones, but I saw no market improvement whatsoever, even with the added weapon of Kenny Golladay, who had 6 targets and 4 catches and 64 yards. The number 1 receiver, who has been the number 1 receiver for Daniel Jones since he's been in the league, was Sterling Shepard. 7 receptions, 113 yards, a touchdown, 9 targets. I'm not expecting Sterling Shepard to put up those kind of numbers every single week, but the slot receiver, the short intermediate route runner, is the go-to guy of Daniel Jones. Plain and simple. That hasn't changed. So I don't know if there's any wide receiver the Giants. I was already low on Kenny Golladay as it was, but I don't know if there's any receiver I can really trust because I don't trust Sterling Shepard to do that every week. I especially don't trust him to stay healthy. If this continues to happen, where he continues to be the most targeted guy, you might be pick him up off the streamer as a flex play here and there in PPR leagues, perhaps. But I just don't expect big things out of this Giants offense in general. Then we get into the Saquon issue. He played more as the game went on. Snap-wise, him and Booker were actually pretty close, though, in snaps. They got a Thursday night game. I think that's going to be detrimental to Saquon. Not only is it another tough matchup because it's against Washington, but now on top of it, how much more are you going to play him on a Thursday night? Are you going to be a little bit leery because it's such a back-to-back? You're still trying to ease him in. You have Saquon. You have to play Saquon, unfortunately, because of where you drafted in the first round. But I would have my expectations lowered with him, and we'll probably talk about him as a buy low candidate after that Washington game because then the schedule starts to get a little bit easier. We'll expect his workload to start ramping up when they have the 10 days off heading into week 3. I do expect that to happen, but he's going to probably be a buy low candidate. You might have to ride him out just one more week there for Saquon Barkley before he's full go and being the workhorse guy. It ain't going to be long because it's clear they're going to have to figure out something offensively, especially since I'm expecting him to have another bad offensive performance. They're going to have to get some pressure off of Daniel Jones. They're going to have to get him getting the ball out of his hands faster. Their best player on offense is Saquon. If he can't go at a Saquon pace, they have no shot on offense to be good. That's just clear to me. Should be clear to everybody after watching that game. So I think there's a decent chance Saquon will be Saquon by week 3 as far as his workload is concerned. Physically, he looked okay to me. He made cuts. He looked like, he still has kind of a sea legs. I don't think he's quite fully in Saquon Barkley explosive mode, but I don't think it's going to take long. It didn't look like he was hesitating on the knee. That's the most important thing you walk away from that game, in my mind. On the Broncos side of the ball, Melvin Gordon has the big stat line because he had the big 70-yard run, gets over 100 yards, but 11 carries, Javonte Williams, 14. 34 snaps of Javonte Williams is 36. So I would actually say, workload speaking, it's leaning a little bit more Javonte's way. It just happened to be Melvin Gordon who went off with a big carry. It's still going to be basically a 50-50 split committee. That doesn't really change. And that's going to continue to be the case until somebody gets injured or Javonte Williams just outright outplays Melvin Gordon. Now, it didn't happen this week. Could happen towards the end of the year. But nothing really changes for me as far as what I consider out of this backfield. Maybe Melvin Gordon gives you the confidence that, okay, it's going to be a 50-50 split. I can play him as a flex play. But he's still nothing more than an RB3 at the end of the day because he's going to be in a 50-50 split with Javonte Williams. And they need pro game scripts like this for both of them to get, double-digit carries in this game. From a receiving standpoint, Melvin Gordon was the better receiver. 3 targets, 3 catches, 17 yards. Javonte Williams had 1 reception on 1 target, -4. But he's still a pass catcher too. And I don't expect that to be the case every week. Unfortunately, Jerry Jeudy, he's going to be out next 4 to 6 weeks. At first, it was 6 to 8. Now I'm hearing 4 to 6 as far as that high ankle sprain goes. He'll be back at some point this season. I guess that's the good news because it looked like an injury where he might not be. In the meantime, Courtland Sutton, who only had 3 targets in this game, still led the way in snaps. And now it's going to be more of a focus on getting Courtland Sutton more featured, I believe. He's going to be probably rotated out throughout more. He's going to probably be in motion more. He's going to probably be inside, outside a little bit more. There's going to be an emphasis on featuring Courtland Sutton. So I think this actually will help his value. Physically, Sutton looked good to me. And that's a big thing there, too. Teddy Bridgewater spreading the ball all around. And frankly, Teddy Bridgewater didn't have to throw the ball that much, 36 times. That's a decent number, but not a great number. I think what you're happiest about, if you're a Broncos, is that Noah Fant had 8 targets. He led the way in targets in this game, 6 catches, 62 yards. Something people were worried about. Noah Fant needs the volume to be fantasy relevant, to be that top 8 tight end that people drafted him to be. Well, in a game like this where everybody was healthy for most of the game until Judy went down, Noah Fant was very much involved, even with the Broncos playing, 12-man personnel, with Albert O actually getting a touchdown in this game. You feel good about Noah Fant being able to return on your investment there, which honestly, with all these mouths to feed and Teddy Bridgewater being the quarterback, I do think there was a big risk as far as what his floor could be, and probably still will be on a week-to-week basis. But I like the fact that they came out in week 1 in a pro game script. Noah Fant was the leading targeted guy. Now, I expect that to be Courtland Sutton more times than not, but moving forward, I'm good with Courtland Sutton. I'm good with Noah Fant. We're going to talk about Tim Patrick when we get to the waiver wire in just a bit. What we're going to do now, let's keep going here. Let's keep going to the Seattle Seahawks, Indianapolis Colts. Russell Wilson is doing Russell Wilson things. I mean, 23 attempts, 4 touchdowns. The touchdown rate, absolutely insane for him. Just doing Russell Wilson things as he always does. With DK Metcalf, he had a little bit of a slow start. Still winds up with 5 targets, which when you have only 23 pass attempts, still a good ratio. Tyler Lockett, also 5 targets. Winds up able to getting that 4 receptions for 60 yards and a touchdown, though. That's the good news. Because it was looking pretty bad there for a minute. Tyler Lockett comes in. He's got the big day. 4 catches, 100 yards, 2 touchdowns. Hopefully this will confirm what I was telling everybody all offseason long and why I was drafting Tyler Lockett in the 5th round in every single one of my drafts out there. Hopefully this confirms in everybody's mind, Tyler Lockett is not going away. He's not disappearing. He's not chopped liver. He's not somebody you can't trust. He's not somebody you can't play. A guy who had 100 receptions and everybody was acting like he was poison in their fantasy leagues. Unfathomably to me, this is a 1A, 1B situation. This is not DK Metcalf and then Tyler Lockett might get sprinkled in for a few games here and there. I told everybody after last year, yes, he's always been a bit of a boomer bust player, but the inconsistency that he was a season ago was not just on him. It was the entire Seattle offense. They are running a new scheme now. And while he may not have 100 yards and 2 touchdowns next week, it's not going to be such a Jekyll and Hyde situation. Or I don't think he's going to go off this week like he did against Arizona last year and then go 7 games before he does anything again. The different offense with Shane Waldron. It looked like a good offense too. And even though it was only 23 pass attempts for Russell Wilson, he got to cook quite a bit and it looked like the scheme fit really, really well. Another thing, Chris Carson, 16 carries, 91 yards. He looked great. Was absolutely happy to see him be there and be involved in the pass game. 3 catches, 26 yards on 3 targets. Rashad Penny, hurt again. Shocker to no one. There's nobody back there. Unless Chris Carson gets hurt, there's no other Seattle running back who's going to be that involved. Flip it on the Colts side. Carson Wentz, a very uneven performance. Now, he definitely was not 100% healthy. It was obvious. The way he was moving around was pretty ginger on that foot. Kind of hobbled, got caught in the pocket a few times. Here's what was interesting about this to me. Jonathan Taylor had 7 targets. We talked about all offseason. I was not big on Jonathan Taylor being a first-round running back because I questioned how much involvement he would be in the passing game. What would Nyheim Hines do to limit his ceiling for him being a full workhorse? Can't say that. He had 23 touches in this game total, 7 targets. He was actually just very inefficient as a runner, 17 carries, 56 yards, and he just didn't get in the end zone. However, before you Jonathan Taylor lovers who drafted him in the first round start berating me, Nyheim Hines had 8 targets. Nyheim Hines led the way on the team in targets. 6 catches, 48 yards. And he was in on all those passing down roles that I talked about that I was worried for Jonathan Taylor. The difference was that they actually threw the ball to Taylor on first and second down quite often. Really, the biggest difference is Carson Wentz inexplicably threw 15 targets to the running backs in general. Not something I was expecting. Not something I was expecting at all. So that's going to be interesting to watch to see if that continues. Is Carson Wentz, as long as his foot is hurt, looking to get the ball out of his hands quickly in a glorified Phillip Rivers? It kind of felt that way. As a result, though, Michael Pittman, very disappointing. 4 targets, 3 catches, 29 yards. Paris Campbell, 3 targets, 1 catch, 24 yards. Zach Pascal's the guy who comes away with the 2 touchdowns, but still only 4 catches for 43 yards on 5 targets. You weren't blown away by any of the wide receivers. And Michael Pittman, who I was big on coming into this game, is disappointing, and I think you kind of have to bench him until you see it now. Because this is Seattle secondary that you should still be able to take advantage of. Now, Seattle's defense played really well. I think part of it is the Colts are not firing on all cylinders yet. And, Carson Wentz, who missed a lot of training camp and is not 100% healthy, rightfully so. But the Seattle defense has to be given some credit because they're not going to be the pathetic, leaky sieve that they were a season ago. They're just not. As long as Jamal Adams is out there, they might be pretty good against the run, and they look like they're playing a solid game plan of keeping guys in front of them. They're just not trying to do too much. They're just trying to play fundamental football. So this might not be the Seattle defense that we can just take advantage of, although I think against better teams, more explosive teams, I think they will have some problems in the secondary. Because it's still a secondary to talent-wise you should be able to take advantage of. 49ers and Lions. We got to take a second on this game. There's a lot to unpack. Shanahan is a jerk, first and foremost. So are all the 49er beat writers. They're all jerks. As far as the fantasy owner perspective is concerned, I hate them all. I hate them all, guys. I'm with you. I get it. I hate them all. Very disappointing. Trey Sermon is an inactive. That's a red flag because of the way Kyle Shanahan talked about him after the game. Said, well, Sermon didn't beat anybody out. He's the 4th best running back. He's the 4th running back on our depth chart. Now, we all have eyes, and this is where I say Kyle Shanahan's a jerk. We all have eyes. We all saw preseason. Sermon worked as the number 2 running back. He worked with the starters when Raheem Mostert was not out there during preseason, and the dress rehearsal they had in week 3, he played right after Mostert did. Every beat writer talked about in training camp how he was getting reps with the ones, and that possibly him and Mostert are going to be in some sort of committee. We have eyeballs. Don't tell me that Trey Sermon suddenly, right before week 1, went from being the number 2 all offseason to now he's number 4 in the depth chart. I don't buy it. I think what happened was they were going up against Detroit. They decided they wanted to get some extra depth at other positions, only wanted to carry 3 running backs. JaMychal Hasty and Elijah Moore, they play special teams. Trey Sermon does not. And they probably didn't figure that Raheem Mostert would get hurt in the first game in the first half. I mean, my goodness with him. I mean, there's injury prone and there's being made of paper. It's ridiculous with Raheem Mostert. He's out for at least the next 8 weeks now. He'll be back at some point this year, I guess, but he's out for the next 8 weeks. And with this 49ers backfield, who knows what that means? Who knows what that means? Don't dump Trey Sermon. It's the 49ers backfield. I want you guys to keep this in mind. And we'll talk about this a little bit more when we talk about Elijah Mitchell in a few minutes. It's just as likely, now that Mostert is out, that Sermon is not only activated, which I think that's a given. I expect him to be. He's activated, but would it shock anybody if he wound up being the lead ball carrier next week against the Philadelphia Eagles? Would it shock anyone? No, it wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me if he beat out Elijah Mitchell in carries next week, even after this whole fiasco this week of all this confusion and saying he's the 4th running back. And it wouldn't surprise, because that's how he treats his running backs. How many times did we go through with Jerick McKinnon, was it Jerick McKinnon or Jeff Wilson week? How many times did that flip-flop back and forth? How low was Jeff Wilson on the depth chart before he suddenly got a start last year? He was a 4th running back at one point on the depth chart, and all of a sudden he was starting. This is the point with Kyle Shanahan. This is why I don't go crazy with Elijah Mitchell. He's definitely a top pickup this week, but don't go crazy. There's a lot of moving parts when it comes to Kyle Shanahan and this team. It's really annoying, but there is. There's a lot of moving parts, and don't drop Trey Sermon. Don't. It seemed like this week 1, was about Shanahan trying to make statements. Because it wasn't just that. Then he had the Brandon Ayuk situation, who goose eggs everybody, plays 26 snaps, doesn't receive a single target. And before everybody goes, oh, Trent Sherfield, look, he had 2 catches for 23 yards and a touchdown. He played 1 more snap than Brandon Ayuk. My initial reaction was I thought maybe, because they're playing Detroit, Brandon Ayuk still working through that hamstring issue, maybe they were just, we'll play it safe, play it cautious, we won't have him full go. Then you find out, even though he's a full participant in practice on Thursday and Friday, he was actually practicing with the practice squad, with the scout team. He wasn't practicing with the ones. Then they come out and say, well, he's still learning to be a pro. He missed some time. It sounds like to me, Kyle Shanahan looked at Brandon Ayuk. Something else is going on behind closed doors. He looked at Brandon Ayuk, he looked at Trey Sermon, and he decided to try to send them a message. I want you guys to keep in mind because there's analysts out there, and now you have these beat writers out there, some of them at least anyway, who are making this case that Brandon Ayuk may not be a starting receiver at all this year, barring injury. That he may be in a rotation with Trent Sherfield for the rest of the season. No. Guys, think about this. Use your brains. That's not going to be the situation. Brandon Ayuk is coming off of a great rookie year. Now, maybe he tailed off. Maybe he tried to play it safe. Maybe he didn't go 100% with the hamstring injury. Maybe he was, he should have been back before that and wasn't. Maybe they didn't like the effort he was giving. I don't know. But they traded up in the first round to get this guy. He has a very impressive rookie year. It's this organization, this coaching regime, this front office that wanted Brandon Ayuk in the first round. There is a personal investment from this regime to have Brandon Ayuk be successful. So whether it's a mixture of coming back from the hamstring and trying to send him a message because they didn't like maybe some of the effort that he was putting out, trying to play it safe, making business decisions, whatever the case may be, remind yourselves, Brandon Ayuk, there's a personal investment to have him succeed on this team. So before you start subscribing to this idea that he's never going to be a starting receiver, he's going to be on a rotational basis all throughout the year, all throughout the season, keep that in mind. Don't go selling off Brandon Ayuk for pennies on the dollar. We don't do that here at MD Nation, first and foremost, because you never want to be the sucker. And that means you're going to be the sucker. Only if it's the last resort do we sell off players for pennies on the dollar. Don't do it with Brandon Ayuk. Telling you right now, this is not a done deal situation. Deebo Samuel was great. And as far as the 49ers are concerned, I think there's only 2 players you can play with confidence next week. George Kittle and Deebo Samuel. Outside of that, I don't know if you can play anybody with confidence. Even if we get confirmation about it being Elijah Mitchell. We're going to be watching that practice report really closely all week long. Garoppolo played great. Problem with him for fantasy is that apparently Trey Lance is going to steal red zone opportunities. So how do you play a quarterback who's literally getting vultured? Jared Goff, nothing can't be said about the Detroit Lions the way they came back. I know they say there's no moral victories in the NFL. This has to be considered a moral victory for the Detroit Lions. It just has to be. He had 338 yards, 3 touchdowns. He had a great fantasy day. And you know what? He might be a streamer. He might be a streamer throughout the year because this game script, the Lions found themselves in against the 49ers. This is an anomaly. This is going to be a game script that's pretty consistent for them throughout the season because that defense is awful. Getting worse, by the way, after the injury to Jeff Okudah. Their team's got to come back a lot. Talk about bad reporting. I also want to smack the reporter who at the last second before the game kicked off decided to say, hey, Jamal Williams is going to be the starter and get the bulk of the carries, get the bulk of the load. That's what they said. He's going to start the game fine, but they also added in he's going to get the bulk of the work. It made people like me think something happened to DeAndre Swift. Something last second happened because suddenly they're freaking out on NFL Network about it. Well, guess what? Swift wound up having 2 more carries than Jamal Williams, although Williams actually was the more efficient guy on the day and still had a decent game if you did start him at the last second. And he had 2 more targets. Both had 8 receptions. Swift had 65 yards and a touchdown receiving. Jamal Williams, 8 receptions, 56 yards. We knew that both these guys would be significantly involved. I said it from the get-go. Swift is an RB2. Jamal Williams is an RB3 with flex appeal. Because they're going to be in game scripts like this all year long. Both are pass-catching backs. Both will be involved to that extent. and that this whole offense is going to flow through the running backs and TJ Hawkinson, who, by the way, was tremendous. 8 catches, 97 yards, a touchdown, 10 targets in what was a tough matchup. There's not a wide receiver to own in Detroit. They were featuring Tyrell Williams as the number one guy. There's not enough to go around. They're not a big enough part of the offense. That's not where the game script's going to go. It's going to go to the running back. It's going to go to the tight end. Maybe a St. Brown or a Tyrell Williams. And Williams, in his own defense, he got hurt in this game. He probably was saw a few more targets. He had a concussion. He's in the concussion protocol now. As far as snaps goes, up until that point, he was dominating that way. But I don't know if there's a wide receiver in Detroit worth owning, at least not right now anyway. Let's get into our waiver wire. And we're going to kind of move through this a little bit quick just because we're running out of time. Really kind of overtime to begin with anyway. But we do have quite a bit for a week 1. Believe it or not. Quite a bit for a week 1. And as I'm pulling it up here, this year what we're doing a little bit differently. I'm going to talk about fab budget. I'm going to talk about whether guys are worth it to use that priority on or not. But I'm also going to break it down by position. Usually I would break it down, who's most owned, the least owned, and things of that nature. I'm going to break it down by position this year. So I start off with the quarterbacks that are worth picking up. To me, it's only 2. And this, again, remember, I should lead off with this because it's the first week of the year. These guys are on average less than 50% owned across all the major platforms. So I take ESPN, Yahoo, NFL, I put them all together. And whoever is on average less than 50% owned is who I talk about. So shockingly enough, Justin Fields was at 48%. I was very, very surprised by that he's actually just under that 50% threshold mark. After that game last night, not that we didn't know it was already going to happen, but it just gives us confirmation that Justin Fields is going to be the starting quarterback very, very soon. I don't know if it's going to be week 2 soon, but it's going to be very, very soon. And we got to see on display right off the bat in his little goal line package there, he's going to have the ability to run it in for a lot of touchdowns. He's going to have the ability to run around. It's just going to be a fantasy asset. He just is. So Justin Fields is a top pickup for me at the quarterback position. If he's available and people are catching on to that, well, I would use probably about 10 to 15% of fab budget if you're looking for a quarterback. Because if you draft a quarterback late, like you're going to stream him, Justin Fields is a real chance for the guy you pick up and be a top 10 quarterback for you from the moment he starts on. You may not have to stream. So as a result of that, he's very much worth a priority if you need a quarterback. He's worth a little bit of fab budget if you need a quarterback too. The other guy is Jameis Winston. They got another nice matchup coming up here this week. He's 26% owned. I don't know if he'll stay that efficient as he was in this game, but he was too efficient to ignore. Plain and simple. He was too efficient to ignore. You have to play Jameis Winston without a doubt. Without a doubt, you play Jameis Winston. So 26%, you don't have to use a priority on him. You don't have to use fab budget on him, but he is definitely a streaming quarterback. Just think about this. He did that without Michael Thomas, with a bunch of no-name receivers for the most part. And he put up 5 touchdowns on what should be a playoff team, the Green Bay Packers. And it's not a shabby secondary. It's not a great defense, but this isn't a horrible defense we're talking about. And he looked very efficient in that game, looked very comfortable in the offense. Jameis Winston on his way to being a viable fantasy threat yet again, which he has been throughout most of his career. He's been that throughout most of his career. James White, 47%, leads off my running backs. PPR monster. An absolute PPR monster. Latavius Murray, he's going to be 45%. Tyson, like I said, that game's going on now as we're recording this. We know Tyson Williams is going to lead the way. But for all the signings that they made with Le'Veon Bell and Devonta Freeman, they weren't active. Latavius Murray was active right away. Now, I don't expect him to be involved in week 1, and he may not be that involved in week 2. He's still got to get acclimated to the offense, get involved. But he fits what the Ravens do very, very, very well. And if Tyson Williams falls off or gets hurt, Latavius Murray is going to have some serious value. So I don't think you have to use a lot of fab. I don't think you have to use a priority on him if he's available in that league. But he's definitely worth a pickup. Carlos Hyde, 14% owned. I think you have to pick him up, especially with the James Robinson owner. It's clear he's the top handcuff there. If he were to continue getting the bulk of the carries, it would be interesting if he starts scoring touchdowns. He could be a flex play. I don't think it's going to continue to happen, frankly, in my opinion, but he is definitely a handcuff you need to pick up. Another handcuff you need to pick up is Kenneth Gainwell. He's only 3% owned. Miles Sanders, not a model of being able to stay healthy. I'm all about Kenneth Gainwell. He's very similar to Miles Sanders in how he plays. Clearly well ahead of Boston Scott and everybody else in the back there, 3%. I don't think you have to get too much. If you're the Miles Sanders owner, I think you need to own Kenneth Gainwell. I think you can get away without Fab. Because if you're not the Miles Sanders owner, I don't know how hard you're going after Kenneth Gainwell. I don't think you need to use a priority on him too, but he needs to be on there. Mark Ingram, again, has to make the waiver wire list. Like I said, you can't ignore 26 carries. You just can't. So you have to take that into consideration here. Mark Ingram, lead running back for the Houston Texans. If you need running back depth, he is a pickup. I'm not spending Fab on him. I'm not getting a priority. There's still a lot of heads in there. Like I said, this is not a game script that I expect to be very consistent for Houston actually being able to lead, but he has to be on there with 26 carries. You can't ignore that. Last running back is going to be the number one, priority pickup of the week without a doubt. It's Elijah Mitchell, just because so many things are up in the air. He looked great. He was explosive. He has a 3-down skill set. There's no doubt about that. They were excited about him before this game. I just remind you guys, Trey Sermon was drafted ahead. Trey Sermon played ahead all off season long. Kyle Shanahan is a menace when it comes to the running backs. So just because this was Elijah Mitchell's week does not mean it'll be Elijah Mitchell's week again next week. Raheem Mostert will come back at some point this season. So before you guys start blowing half your Fab budget on a player that has a lot of variables in his way to be the league pickup guy to take you to the championship, which I think is what a lot of people are looking at Elijah Mitchell to be, and then very much might wind up being very inaccurate as far as that is concerned, keep that in mind before you start blowing half your Fab on him. I would actually only spend a quarter. That's the most. I would spend 25%. That is the most I would spend on Elijah Mitchell. If you were the Raheem Mostert owner, or if you're the Trey Sermon owner, and you don't want to get screwed because of the madness that is the 49ers backfield, you want to say, hey, I drafted it thinking I was going to have a piece to this. You don't want to get left out. Maybe I'd go to 30% on your Fab. Maybe. But I'm not. If I'm anybody else, I'm not spending more than 25%. Sermon will be involved this year. We're not all idiots. And Mostert will be back at some point. Jeff Wilson, keep this in mind. Jeff Wilson's going to be back at some point. He was on the PUP. He's out 6 weeks. He'll be back again this year too. Elijah Mitchell's not just going to take over. So don't spend money on him like he's going to. That's the biggest piece of advice I can give you guys. If I have a number one waiver priority, would I use it? Sure. 25% of my Fab budget, would I use it? Sure. I'm not going any higher than that, though. I'm not going to be the guy who blows his entire Fab on Elijah Mitchell. Think about all the variables. For the wide receivers, Tyrell Williams makes my list because of the snap count that he was seeing. But again, a guy who's more of a speculative add and stash, not anything I'm spending a priority or Fab budget on. Sammy Watkins, 13%. Little interested in him. Again, that game is going on. Marquise Brown, I think, has gotten involved. Sammy Watkins has been involved, knows that system. Rashad Bateman's still going to be out for a few more weeks. Again, not wasting a priority or Fab budget on him, but if you're looking for wide receiver depth after this week, somebody who I'm going to have of note on the back of my mind. Christian Kirk, probably would have him ahead of Sammy Watkins if I'm targeting guys. Again, AJ Green looked like he was done, looked like he was washed up. I don't see any difference here with, Christian Kirk. 3.6%. I expect him to be the second most targeted wide receiver on this team throughout the year. He looked pretty good. Obviously, he had the 2 touchdowns. You should be able to get him kind of cheap because I don't think there's going to be a lot of people targeting him. I wouldn't spend a priority on him. I don't think I would spend any Fab budget on him either. I don't think you have to. Now, he had 2 touchdowns. So that's the only reason why he might be on people's radar. But a lot of people might be looking at this as a very crowded wide receiver room for the Arizona Cardinals too. So I would see if you can get away with it because the next guy, Tim Patrick, for at least the next 4 to 6 weeks anyway, is going to have similar value. He's only 1% owned. You can get him for free. No one's going to go after him too hard. You can get him for free, and he should be a pickup of yours. Trent Sherfield, he does need to be mentioned as a pickup. He did play as the second starting wide receiver on this team. He did catch a touchdown. Again, I'm not spending anything to go get him. But until we get this Ayuk situation sorted out, he at least has to be on your radar as a sneaky pickup in deeper leagues. Adam Troutman, only 5% owned. Adam Troutman needs to be owned more than that. Adam Troutman is a sleeper tight end. I know the stat line wasn't gaudy. I know Juwan Thompson was the one who wound up with the 2 touchdowns, or Juwan Johnson, excuse me. But he played by far the most. He had the most targets on the team. This guy will be a sleeper. He will be a streamer for you throughout the week. If you have 2 tight ends on your team because you're thinking about flipping back and forth, Adam Troutman is someone who you should own right now. So that does it for the waiver wire. That does it for the show. We went a little bit longer than we expected to, but that's okay. Guys, we're going to be back at 11 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. on social media at BellyUpMDFF Show and on the YouTube channel, the MD's Fantasy Football Show. Please subscribe. But we'll be back. We'll be back on Thursday and Friday to give you guys the preview for the Thursday night game and the early Sunday games on Thursday. And of course, Friday, we'll give you the recap. We'll give you the recap of Thursday night and the late Sunday afternoon games, Sunday night and Monday night game. We'll be back on Saturday to give you our DFS contest. We're going to announce the winner on that on Wednesday when we open up next week's DFS contest. We do have a winner for that one who won a 1 free week of Easy Sports betting data, and will be eligible for the September Championship Football giveaway. So make sure you tune in at 9:30 at BellyUpMDFF Show and YouTube for that on Saturday night. Try to win you guys some money with our lock bets. And then we'll be back on Sunday night. We'll be able to go into more depth in the recaps like we like to do and really kind of get into the analysis of it. Make sure you guys are more well prepared. Again, we couldn't do it. That's why we had to do a bit of a rush show, because usually what we'll do is we'll come back Monday night. We'll be back Tuesday morning like we are now, just recapping the Sunday night, the Monday night game, and going a little bit deeper into the waiver wire report too. So more of that will be coming for you guys, but this week will be a normal week. We'll have 5 shows for you this week. And don't forget to check us out on the Unhinged Radio Network. We'll be on that from 7 to 8 on Tuesday nights, 6 to 7:30 on Thursday and Friday, 12 to 1 on Sunday, and 6 to 7:30 again on Monday. Go to unhingedsn.airtime.pro. Hey, guys, take it easy. Have a wonderful night. We'll see you all real soon. See you on Thursday. Make sure